for me, this topic is something I live every day, which is diversity and inclusivity. Because when I first started working at CBC Radio, and back in 1998 or 97, actually 97, I actually didn't listen to CBC Radio at all. Like it didn't reflect me at all. It didn't sound like me. It didn't sound like our city. It was like nothing that I was interested in on any level whatsoever. And I don't say this proudly, because it's kind of embarrassing to work someplace and you're producing a radio show and you're not even listening to it. You look at the board every night before you left and you'd say, is there anything on the show tomorrow that I actually care about? And the answer 9 times out of 10 for me was no. And so it was very hard working there, because they're just doing things that I was not absolutely interested in. And that's why I ended up in sports. And when I was in the sports thing, I got to do things I actually was interested in, which was I got to do a couple of things I liked, like covering the inaugural Olympics and ended up going to Sydney. But I ended up back in current affairs, back on the show, where I was doing things that I was absolutely had no interest in listening to. And so we had a new boss that came over, and my boss was a woman who had actually done a lot of work in other stations across the country in terms of making them more inclusive and making them more diverse. And she asked me, and I don't know why she asked me, maybe it's because I was the only black guy in the show, that's probably the main reason why she asked me, is what would I do if I had a chance to rebuild the station, what would I do? And I said, well, the first thing I'd do is make this show sound like the city we live in. I said, because it doesn't sound like Toronto. Like, we're supposed to be the most diverse city in the world. Like, concerning, many organizations say that. And we did not sound like that. You could not turn on Metro Morning in the mornings back in 1998 and 1999 and think you lived in a city that was multicultural. Like, you'd never think that. It was all men over 50, mostly white, talking about things that interest all men over 50 and who were white. We didn't have enough.
And there's no one like that in this room.
No, but no, we didn't have any. We didn't even have like simple like women. We didn't even have women on this show. Like it was such a show that it had no range, and it wasn't that it was a bad show. And I mean, the things they talked about were interesting, I guess. I don't know. I didn't listen often, but no, it's just that we live in a city, and I think as a public broadcaster, our job and our mandate is to actually reflect the audiences we serve. And that's why I like the idea of working at CBC to begin with. That's why I actually wanted to go there. I left from I worked in the private industry before that, and I wanted to be on CBC for that specific reason. And so I was a little disheartened when it wasn't that. And so the idea was to change that. And so I think over the years, and why we've become one of the most listened to radio shows in the city, is because we did that. We changed the station. But the only way you can make that change is if you make change in the people who make choices about what goes on the radio as well. And that was the hardest part, was getting people in there, and it was a slow process because positions had to open up, you had to bring people in, but you have to have people at the table who make decisions about what goes on air, reflecting the audience you're serving. And I think that's the one thing, if I could take one takeaway for you that I think we've done a really good job of, is actually making our station sound like the city we live in, because the people who make the decisions on what goes on the air look and sound like the city we live in as well.
And I'm from Maitri, which is a private foundation which invests in diversity and leadership. And we're one of those organizations that talks about Toronto being one of the most diverse cities in the world. And we're looking at boardrooms, we're looking at City Hall, and we're looking at media. And we're seeing that the diversity we see on the streets isn't reflected in all of those places where the decisions are made. So we have a series of programs that address all of those things. And today, obviously, I'm talking about the media and the power of the media to influence our perceptions of leadership. So it was great to hear Bob Butler on Metro Morning yesterday, I swear, talking about some of the statistics coming out of the U.S. And I was really interested to hear the stats out of the annual report. 12.6% of managers in the media in the States are people of color. And our organization, in collaboration with Ryerson University Diversity Institute, just this year, a few months ago, did the first ever study of people of color in the media at senior levels. And it was interesting to see that we're actually doing a little bit worse here. So in terms of who's in charge, we've got 4.8%. And we looked at boards of directors, we looked at newsroom editors and producers and senior management. So 4.8% versus what Bob was talking about, 12.6% yesterday. So we know that who's in charge influences who's seen. And the stats are a little better here for Canada, for GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. because that was what we were looking at specifically. So 19.6% was what we saw reflected in terms of visible minorities. And I'm going to use visible minorities. That's what we use for our program because that's what Statistics Canada uses. And this is interesting because this is a city where our motto is diversity is our strength. And in 2017, there are going to be more visible minorities as the majority of the population. So we need to start looking at that. So I don't have to tell anyone in this group the tremendous power of the media to identify who key voices are, to create a platform where these voices can have some influence, and then ultimately inspire other voices and other leadership. And one of the programs that I work on at Maitre is called Diversity Voices. And we really are identifying key people in the city who are experts on a number of different issues, and we're emphasizing other than diversity. So we want people to be, from our communities, to be talking about issues like the environment, like filmmaking. We're in the midst of a municipal election right now. It's great, we're getting calls from journalists who are interested in what people have to say about transportation. So we've got this great database of people. We're encouraging journalists to search our database, to get these voices out there. And we really want to cut ourselves out of that equation. We want to establish new networks and encourage journalists and the experts in our organization to forge their own relationships, because so much of what we hear, and it seems that it's echoed south of the border, is that people they go to their own Rolodexes. They're not expanding networks, so we'd really like to encourage that.
I came to CBC. I was actually invited to work at a program called As It Happens. This was a few years ago, this was the late 80s. At that time, As It Happened, it had a story out of Zimbabwe, would phone the local BBC reporter, a white guy there. And I stood in front of the mirror and I looked at myself. I'm not a white guy, and I speak English, and I know how to use a phone. This was a phone that we phone people around the world. And basically, I just started calling people locally and asking them for their opinions. And often I would be told, particularly, and I would also do Ontario, other than the rest of the work, I had a small beat. And inevitably I would be told by people, but I'm not an expert. And my answer was fairly straightforward. Yeah, you're not an expert. I put you on As It Happens tomorrow, you will be the expert. And to this day, I hear a lot of those people on the air. In my experience, when one deals with the issue of diversity and equity on this continent, we have panels, we have experts, we bring in consultants. In Canada, I suppose we'd have a royal commission. Well, there's only one way of doing it. You get off your ass and do it. It's not that hard to do.
Can you say that again?
Get off your and do it.
And it's very easy to do. It's really not that hard. There are a lot of talented people in the world, and a lot of what we do as journalists is not a secret. It basically, when I talk particularly to university students, I explain very clearly what I do for a living. I am a gossip. I get it right. That basically is the difference. Like, we figure it out, and we only tell you stories that you're interested in. There's no big secret about how we do it, but you have to get it right. And there are ways that we learn to do it. What we end up is, well, I don't think, like, in the media, in Canada in particular, we will often recognize journalists from other parts of the world that have done great work. We have big dinners for them, for how they have fought for democracy. How often have you heard a story anywhere in North America about a journalist who's driving a cab? Have you ever heard it? I know an awful lot of them.
Yeah.
But we never put them on, we talk about doctors that don't get jobs and they're driving cabs. Never hear about the journalists, and we can help them get work. And a lot of us in this room, we may think we're not in positions of power, but we are. We may not hire people, but we can show people where the pathways are, where the routes are, how do you get a job, whom do you need to know. These are the things that are important. And it's an issue that we've been trying to address. Like, the point I try to make to my labor colleagues, my union colleagues, is we actually do have power. We can help people find work. And we have to do it. Like, nobody else is going to do it. Nobody's going to give you a job. Nobody's going to help you hire somebody else unless you help them. And by the way, Nick, the thing that Nick did with Metro Morning is totally mind-blowing. It's amazing. If you walk into that shop, you actually see Canada there. When there was a young Chinese child kidnapped, they were the people that could get in because they had somebody that spoke Mandarin. It's really very simple. It's not that hard. In Canada, we have our definition of diversity is a little different from the American one, which I run into fairly often when I work with the American levels of the union. It's in the United States, you primarily see diversity as a black-white issue. Here it's a little more complicated.
Well, I think it's changing. America is just becoming much more brown and very quickly. In the next 10 years, there's going to be a revolution.
Oh, the next 10 years, the population is going to be Hispanic.
You heard it here first. No, you know it. You can see it. Now, are there questions for our group? Because they laid out some stuff. Okay.
I just want to make a comment more than a question.
Sure. That's welcome.
Diversity goes beyond hiring people from different backgrounds. Diversity should also be reflected in the news and how it is reported, the sensitivity. I use myself as an example. I'm from Ghana, okay, and every time I hear the news, somebody saying, oh, first of all, they lump Africa as one country. Okay?
Not continental.
Yeah. And then they say, it goes on to say that, oh, it's one of the poorest countries in the world, or the poorest country in the world. There was a time, this was a report on CBC. It was a report on the death of Salif Keita, okay, in Mali. Somehow, the story got beyond saying that this man was an accomplished singer to saying that Mali is one of the poorest countries in the world. None of that has to do with somebody else. Okay. I personally, I feel slapped down every time I hear it. Okay, and I'm just saying, and I'm picking up on what George said, that we have power in the newsrooms. And why don't we use that power to correct that unfairness, that imbalance, that insult?
When the first mosque in Inuvik opened, was shipped up by a boat on a barge from Winnipeg. Got up there. The piece started with these people showing up by the dock and watching it. They were all black guys. Every one of them. And I've been trying to tell the story for a long time, because if you go to Inuvik, the first time we drove to Inuvik in 1999, I was astounded by the number of black people there. Imagine getting off a plane as a refugee from Somalia and ending up in Inuvik. Talk about God being unhappy. Inuvik is in the Arctic Circle.
Yes.
The sun doesn't rise there in the winter. You're coming from the equator. Imagine this room. But the thing is, the entire taxi industry there is black guys. 2 years later, to give you context on how these things work, there was a story about how there was a problem with taxi drivers getting licenses. Okay? This is where the hierarchy of a newsroom becomes really important. And I said, well, there's a reason for that, because all the people that actually drive the cabs are black. People that own the licenses are white. To which it was immediately dismissed as, you're a brown guy. How the hell would you know that? This is in Inuvik in the Arctic. In that entire broadcasting center, I think I was the only one that had been to Inuvik. On a vacation, no less. This is even the corporation center. But my entire allowance was dismissed. So I get my vengeance now. I'm in the driver's seat. I decide we're doing this story. We hire a freelance shooter to shoot it. And so all these men come down, and all these women come down, and almost everyone of them black. I never said a word about anybody being black. But we've made the point, and suddenly everybody in Toronto, which those of you from the United States may not know is the heart of the universe.
That was New York.
No, it's not.
Or the city.
So we made it into a people's story. And that's what always, well, it's not that it sells, it's that that's what we want. That's the story I want. It's about people. And that's how you make it happen.
That's how you make it happen.
Sure. Just to pick up on some of those things, like in terms of the universality, when we started this Diversity Voices Rolodex, and it was frustrating because the first month of the program, we were still getting the calls about, do you have a South Asian who can talk about samosas? Like it was just the same tried stories that and the requests that we were getting. And then, about a little bit later, we keep building the relationships. We're talking to journalists. We're selling our idea. Finally, I remember we got this call from a veteran journalist at the Globe and Mail. And she was looking to source a story on the sandwich generation. So this is individuals who have older parents and young children living under the same roof. And there was an Ismaili Muslim woman who I knew who was in that situation. And we connected them, made the match. And the next morning I was coming into work, and this woman and her family were on the front page of the paper talking about being part of the sandwich generation. No mention of them being South Asian, immigrants. And I thought, thank you, this is working.
And I just want to add about something that Lana said. I mean, she pitched something to me many, many years ago, a story about people who live in foster care and foster homes and adoption and stuff. And she wanted to look at the fact that a lot of black male youth weren't getting adopted. Like, they just weren't. They ended up in foster homes their whole life.
They're last a lot of times.
Yeah,
my mom works in this
Nobody
industry.
wants to adopt them. But the way she pitched the story to us, she didn't pitch it as a woe is me black story. She pitched it to me as, think about, imagine you being in this foster home and you're there from your 4, and then every week people come to look at kids and take kids, and they never take you, right? And it was very hard to turn this story down. Like, it's a very touching, moving story. And it was a wonderful piece. And I mean, she's right. It's not about, when you pitch stories that have universal values. Exactly. And I actually said that to Tina just before you said it, because that's what it is about. Like, if we can all relate to it, and the thing is, we all have similar stories, whether we're black, white, yellow, whatever, that we all relate to. And if you can find universal value in the story that we all relate to, people like the story. And then you can get across. I mean, at the end of that story, all we knew was the Holy Marriage, all these black kids aren't getting adopted, but that's not how it started out. But everybody was touched by the story because of the way it was presented.
I'm finding it actually very sad the way corporations solicit and recruit people, because it's not only that we've gone to an online system, we've gone to a system where some software written by some software engineer will decide which resumes I will bother to look at. I find that, first of all, I'm not in a hiring position in my current life. I have been in a hiring position before. And pretty much everybody, and at that time, I mean, and I started in the days where you would photocopy your resume and send it out. And technically it wasn't that much different though. It was fairly similar because you check for keywords. And the thing that I learned one day though, as I was sifting through resumes, and I was about to toss it aside, and I looked at it again, and I said, damn, that could be me. So I picked up the phone and called the person. And I've learned to do that. Obviously what works is you got to figure out who's doing the hiring, pick up the phone and call them. That's how you break through, because otherwise you're going to depend on software deciding whether you get an interview. The chance of you actually getting an interview is 0. Pick up the phone and call them. And hey, basically you have 2 CBC people sitting at this desk, and we can tell you who's doing the hiring. Like, it's, in the journalism business, and it's the point I keep making over and over and over, in Canada it's a very, very, very small business. In North America, compared to anything else, it's a very, very small business. So it comes down to business of whom do you know. It's not that because you know me you'll get a job, but because you know me, I may know somebody who knows somebody who's actually doing the hiring.
So it gets back to
and you show the pathways,
relationships.
and you've got to have the pathways. And that's what I meant by we in this room have a lot of power. We may not be doing the hiring, but we know who could be doing the hiring, what their soft points are, what do they like, what do they don't like. And it's the networking part. And I think we in this room can make a huge difference in that. And from my labor perspective, from within the labor union, like the Canadian Media Guild at the CBC alone represents 5,000 people. All those people that do the hiring, they're all members of the guild. So you know them. Call the guild, say who's running as it happens today. Find out, get a name. There's easy ways of getting a name. Google's not the only king, there's other kings. But you try to get a name, phone them up. And the other part with our emails, by the way, the CBC email, crack the formula for emails. The CBC email is first name, period, last name at cbc.ca. Works.
Well, if you can speak well in small sound bites, you'll get on all the time. That's how it's important how you package your message, for sure. I mean, for me though, like for my show, I'm current affairs show. I am so beyond that stuff. Sound bites. You need to have some depth to get on my show. Personally, like the sound bites I save for the newscast. But how you gotta sell yourself, I still think you gotta find something in your message that everybody can relate to. And if you can't find that, then I don't care what the problem, what your story is, no one's gonna listen to you. And that's the hard part, though. I mean, I took a course in university, a screenwriting course one time, and you had to, the whole course for the whole year, what you had to do was figure out how to tell a 120-word screenplay in six sentences. It's called the Brutal Six. And it had to convey, that 6 sentences had to convey every single thing about the movie that I need to know. And we spent months on that one single thing. So I know it's not an easy thing to do, but when you figure out how to do it, it's absolutely gold. When you figure out how to be able to package what you need to package and make it universal to everybody so that someone will actually buy it, you're going to be all right. And you'll sell any story you want to sell. There's in that PR thing discussion before, which
Yes.
I found fascinating, by the way. And there's absolutely only like 3 PR people in this whole city who, when they call me, I stop and actually listen to them because they absolutely know what we need for my show. They listen to the shows. They know what the show's about. They don't tell me, would you like to speak to our president, who's just going to tell me what a wonderful job they're doing. I don't want presidents and vice presidents and CEOs on unless they're directly involved with the story, because all they're going to tell you is what a great job they do, or they're going to alibi for whatever bad happened. So I don't want them on the radio. I want real people who are impacted by stories. And so if you can find a way to get those messages to the people who make decisions, you'll always get on the air. And these 3 people, when they call me these 3 PR people, I literally stop what I'm doing and listen to them because I know they're going to give me something good. And 9 out of 10 times, whatever they pitch me gets on the air. But they don't pitch often, and when they pitch, they know what they're pitching.
Selective. And
they know how to appeal. And they always pitch universal value. They don't pitch issue. They pitch stories about people that have universal appeal to everybody in the audience.
I just want to go back to where I started in terms of the power of the media to shape perceptions. And we're really focusing a lot on diversity at the upper levels of media, but there's so many other places that we can make change, whether that's making decisions about the people that are cited as experts or even human interest stories, the stock photography that we use. So I think that change, real sustainable change, has to happen at all of those levels.